This is a guide to buying your first 35mm film camera. Now, this is a really intimidating topic for a lot of people because it can be very overwhelming. So I'm just going to go through all the types of cameras that you're going to encounter when you're very first getting into film, and then I'm going to make some suggestions based off of that. Going into the SLRs. So an SLR, essentially, the camera viewfinder is what the lens sees as opposed to a rangefinder, which has a window off the side of the camera, which kind of gives you an idea as to what the camera is seeing through its lens. SLRs are very popular because of their ease of use. They're a little bit more robust than a point and shoot camera. Also, typically they have interchangeable lenses, so you could swap between, say, an 85 or a 50 or a 35mm lens. There's 4 different types of SLRs you're going to be running into. So the first thing I'm going to be starting with is a camera that lets you adjust everything manually. This camera right here, this is a Minolta X-700. So what makes these cameras really nice is you can switch between aperture priority or non-aperture priority. On the top of this camera, you have different options. You can manually choose between the shutter speed. You can manually pick what f-stop you're going to be shooting at on the camera. These cameras are particularly popular. A lot of them are made. Some common pitfalls with the X700, bad capacitors. I've owned probably 3 or 4 of these cameras now. I bought all of them secondhand. 2 out of the 4 had bad capacitors in them or something wrong with them to some extent. What that means for you, if you're not tech savvy like myself, that means you get rid of the camera and try another. If you are tech savvy, you could try taking it apart, replacing the capacitor inside the camera to fix it. At this point, you're probably going to be dissuaded, discouraged, and maybe never pick up a film camera again. But I will say the X700s, when they do work, really any of the Minolta lineup, the shots come out beautifully. So do I recommend this camera for a beginner? Absolutely. If you're looking for something that has some automatic features on it, but you can also get your practice in doing manual exposure, manually picking your shutter speed, manually metering your scenes, this is a good camera for you. Also, this camera does have a light meter as well. So with this camera, you do have a lot of options. You could practice manual, or you could kind of switch things over to automatic a little bit. Now, moving on, we have a manual everything camera. So this is a Nikon F2. I'm a little bit biased towards Nikon cameras right now because of one reason that I'm going to get to in just a second. But talking about the F2 for a second, the reason this is not a automatic camera like that Minolta. So back in the 70s, there really weren't options for aperture priority. So you are manually selecting your shutter speed on every shot that you take on this camera. You are manually adjusting your f-stop for every shot you take on this camera. The only thing this camera does that requires any sort of electronics is the light meter, but the light that's used to illuminate the light meter comes through the top. So if you're like me and you like to wear big brimmed hats like this, your light meter goes away when you're looking through, and it will only return when you move the camera away. Just some things to keep in mind. But as I said, this is a manual only camera. So if you're looking to buy a camera that really lets you get good at metering for light and learning how to read different scenes, this is a great camera for you. Now, that other bonus I talked about with Nikon cameras is their mounting system essentially stayed the same throughout all years of production. You can mount this lens to pretty much any more modern Nikon camera. I believe that's correct. I haven't had any issues so far with doing that, but across all the major camera brands, their mountings stayed the same. So if you're looking to just buy one type of camera and keep working within that brand, Nikon is a good option for you. It was also back in the day, like top of the line. Very popular among newspaper photographers, people who had to have a workhorse. This one I picked up for like $100, which was on the low end for these cameras, but it's definitely got its quirks. The shutter's been sticking lately, dings on here and there. There's the rewind knob. It's not at 100%. It gets stuck a little bit on the rewind. There's a dent here. It's like, this is a workhorse camera. All right, so far we have seen cameras that allow you to pick a lot of different settings. Either you could choose them manually or you could set them more to automatic modes. We've seen cameras that only allow manual selections for your shutter speed and aperture. Now there's another type of SLR that I have quickly become familiar with, and it's a buyer beware. You need to look out when you are buying this kind of camera. So this is a Pentax ME Super. This camera functions, but at a very limited capacity. Now, when I was buying this camera, I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into. This camera right here, just like every other camera, allows you to select your proper f-stop, but you'll notice on the top, it looks very different. You still have your normal turn knob here between auto, manual, and then a 125X. What is 125X? 125X is the one shutter speed you can set this camera to manually. This camera is fully electronic for its shutter selection, so it is always picking the shutter speed for you, no matter what you're doing. That's a cool feature and allows it to be so compact. However, when the electronics go in this camera, which they're at least 40 years old now, they will, you are now stuck at 1/125th shutter speed. If you're buying your first film camera and you're seeing one of these on eBay and it's priced anywhere between $50 and $150, read the description. Make sure that the shutter speed selection actually still works. Really weigh your options out there, because yes, these are compact. You still get the feel of the SLR. You still get the single lens reflex on top. You still get the interchangeable lenses. You may be stuck at a certain shutter speed. Now, my model in particular is in great shape, with the exception of the shutter speed not working. So I plan on actually getting rid of that camera, and I'm just gonna have to disclose to whoever's buying it that, hey, like your SOL when it comes to your shutter speed. So not a very appealing thing. So my point is, if you're just starting to get into film, beware of that lineup of cameras, or cameras that have only automatic shutter. Because you are going to be wondering why your photos aren't turning out, and you're going to get discouraged. You're going to wonder what you're doing wrong, and really it's not you, it's just the age of the camera finally starting to show. So just something to keep in mind. Now, I used to be very discouraged from this type of camera. This is a Nikon N60. Now, I haven't personally tested out this particular N60 yet, but it has features about it that make it a very, very good option for somebody who is just getting into film. This camera allows you to pick between whether or not you want to be on easy mode or whether or not you want to be on manual mode. You can get all the features of all those other cameras I just talked about in this camera, and this camera is not going to break your wallet. These particular camera bodies were made in like the 1990s, so comparatively, these are the newest. The cameras had electronics in them. These are among the newest. You can still mount, because at least with this particular brand, it's a Nikon, you can still mount to all the old glass that you were using with some limitations. But this camera gives you options. You can be on full auto mode, where you not only get auto aperture, auto shutter, you get auto focus. Auto focus is a thing now. Like, it's incredible. Whether or not you trust it, it's up to you, but I'm pretty sure they had it down pretty good when they first made this camera. You got things like a self timer, you got manual mode, so you make the manual selections for your shutter, your f-stop, and your focus, so you can go between all of that stuff. So you still get all the features of all those cameras in this body right here, and it's entirely up to you how you use the camera. The best part about this is like $20, okay? The price point is really the main appeal of these cameras. Let's say you're an amateur photographer and you're seeing all these Instagram reels or TikToks of people getting in the film and like, oh my God, it looks so cool. And then you go to look up prices for cameras like that and you're seeing $100+. You're not gonna wanna get into film. And you know, film is kind of expensive as is, you know, the development process and actually buying film as it is now. So why don't you lower the barrier for yourself, buy a newer, you know, it's probably still as old as you, but newer film camera that allows you to learn how to manually do things like metering your scene, yet also being able to switch over into like an automatic mode where it will help you do the things you want to do. I used to be so put off by these cameras because I was like, well, that's cheating. That's not actually shooting on film, blah, blah, blah. No, like I used to think like, oh, it's too close to digital. Yes and no. You have the choice. I'm excited because I'm going to be making a video with this camera in particular about how to get into film for cheap, like the most economical way to shoot film. I'm really excited because it's going to push my creative boundaries to see just what I can get out of this camera. There's definitely some downfalls of this camera, which I have yet to explore. But that being said, this is a great option for you. So like these are all really important things to consider when buying a 35mm camera, especially if it's something that you're not sure how long you're going to be into it for. Is it just a phase? Am I going to be not into this in a year? Well, buy one of these as opposed to one of the more expensive, more vintage SLRs. Shoot tons of rolls of film on auto, manual, get your practice in. And if you like it, you don't even have to upgrade. Just keep buying better lenses if that's something that you're into. The whole point is with this particular Nikon, there's a lot of options for you. I'm not sure what other camera brands are similar to this. I know Nikon was like king in like the 90s. So this is probably going to be your best bet. For one, just finding some glass to throw on it. And two, just being able to play around with it and try out the manual mode. Get the autofocus if you want autofocus. Much easier camera for you to start getting into film on. SLRs aside, we're going to touch upon point and shoot cameras. So with point and shoot cameras, there's really just two kinds, technically three. So with these point and shoot cameras, there's essentially two types you can buy. You can buy what I essentially refer to as reusable disposable cameras, where essentially you're picking the ISO of the film on the back and you're just letting the camera make all the decisions for you, with the exception being you choose when to use the flash on the camera. This camera is making all the choices for you. I've shot some amazing photos on this particular camera, and I have to say, if you're somebody who's like super casual about film, you don't really care about photography, but you want to bring a camera around when you're going to do stuff with your friends, going on trips, adventures, whatever it may be, this might be the best option for you. I know I said those SLRs are really good, and they are, but they're more or less for the people who are probably looking to do film at a level slightly above amateur. I think this is perfect for somebody who's just going to, events with your friends, hanging out with people, not doing anything crazy, and you can still get some freaking cool shots on these things. So why not pick one of these up? They go anywhere between $20 and $30, and you're not being wasteful. So that's always a plus. Next up, and I'll just touch upon this very quick, this is a rangefinder camera. This one in particular is a Canonet 28. And essentially with a rangefinder is you still get the benefits of the point and shoot, being the size that it is, but you get a little bit more options with this camera. So with this one in particular, you have your selection for aperture, and then you have the selection for the ISO as well. You do not get shutter speed. The shutter speed is going to be determined by the camera. At least this particular rangefinder is pretty simplistic. So you have your selections for the f-stop and then your ISO, and then you frame up your shots through the viewfinder in the top left. It does have a light meter on the inside of the camera. Shows you what shutter speed the camera is going to be going with. So you select your f-stop, and then the camera will make adjustments once you have made that selection. Now on this particular model, I don't believe the light meter works. The camera is still making, on my particular camera, the camera is still making the adjustment to the shutter speed. It's just not displaying it for me within the viewfinder, which can be pretty frustrating. These could range anywhere from like $50 to $150 depending on the quality and the condition it's in. If you want to have some style points and have a cool looking point and shoot camera that makes you think a little bit, maybe a Canonet 28 is for you. So the final type of camera I want to talk about is the auto everything point and shoot camera. So this right here is the Pentax IQZ-EZY. So this camera is fully automatic in every regard. It has DX reading for the film. DX code is actually an identifier on your film strip. It tells the camera what ISO the film is that you just put in the camera. So it's going to make and read DX code. The camera is going to make the selection for you as to what ISO to shoot at. And then it's also going to, based on the lighting in the scene, automatically adjust the aperture of the shot. So these cameras are entirely electronic. Just one thing to keep in mind, these cameras, when they go, they're gone. Like you're not going to want to open this thing up and try and fix the electronics in it, because it's a freaking maze in here. You're essentially holding like 25 years of that kind of technology just compressed into a tiny little brick. When this thing goes, it's dead. Prices range on these things from, you can find them at a flea market for $5, or you can buy them on eBay for $50 to $100. Okay, so I just threw like a ton of information at you, and I'm going to try and just give you a basic suggestion. So you've watched this video, you think you know what camera you want. You're like, yep, I'm somebody who is slightly above amateur and I want to get into film. I've done some digital work before. I'm gonna go find and buy an Nikon N60. My suggestion to you, if you were going to do that, is that you find a local flea market, thrift store, Goodwill, Savers, anything like that. See if you could find something similar to that before you go online. In my experience, I have gotten way better deals going to flea markets, going to thrift stores, garage sales, estate sales. The pricing is always better. I find that those places, you almost never get somebody who either fully understands the value of the camera, or they don't care and they just want to sell it and get rid of it. So my suggestion is to always go for the in-person sale over the online one, because if it's somebody who's constantly selling these things, like the person I get my cameras from, you establish a good connection with them, you network a little bit, and then they start giving you even better deals on cameras. That Minolta X-700 I showed you was untested, needed a little work done to it, and then I got a really good deal on it, so I brought it home, fixed it, and now it works. You know, if you're somebody who can do that kind of stuff, you can really get much better deals on these cameras and really lower the barrier of entry to film. Now, one final thing I will leave you with is, if you are just getting into film and you have no idea what you're doing, or you're afraid of getting discouraged, avoid medium format until you've shot at least 10 or 15 rolls on 35mm film and you know you absolutely love it. Medium format, just to say it briefly, is a much bigger film negative, which means it's going to be a higher resolution image once it's developed. Avoid it early on, because I feel like early on in film you're going to be making and blowing a lot of shots, and maybe your composition won't be there. All I can say is you don't want to get discouraged when you've bought a much more expensive camera. You know, I think people equate the value of the camera with the value of the shot, and sometimes that isn't necessarily the case. Or they think like, oh, I'm buying a $800 camera, I'm going to produce, you know, really valuable photographs, and that's just straight up not true, especially with film. I think film is still reserved a bit for more of the art form of photography, and it really requires more attentiveness when you're shooting shots. So get all the mistakes out of the way early. Buy a Nikon N60 that's $20 on eBay and works, and throw 10 rolls through it. You know, really learn your style, really learn what you like about film, the things you like to shoot when it's cheaper, as opposed to buying medium format cameras, which are $300 and up for anything decent, plus $15 per roll of film, and you only get 10 shots per roll. Yeah, that was a really quick buyer's guide to buying your first 35mm camera. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is Shoot Retro. My name is Hunter. Follow us on Instagram at Shoot Retro. We are making a space for film. Also, check out the website, www.shootretro.com. On shootretro.com, I basically post my whole portfolio there for people to see. I write blog articles, I share these videos there, essentially just making a community for people to talk about film. So thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.